Oh, this is tape 27. Tape 27, we're sitting here. Winter has actually begun. We have the wing drying in silver. The second coat of silver has been wet sanded out, and we're going to let that dry for the rest of the day. If you've been following the videos, you've watched the construction of that wing totally on video. We have the flaps over here drying and the body sitting in the box. So what's next? Obviously we have to come up with a tail before we can assemble this plane. Now step one is let's roll them up and put them at the other end of the table. We're going to be doing a flat tail on this plane, similar to the sweeper. Now what I did, I made the original sketch for this tail. Made the original sketch actually right off my old 1200 sweeper plans, where I had the high rake in the leading edge of the stab, and I had a flat half-inch tail. So this is kind of like rebuilding the old 1200 sweeper here. We're going to make a similar tail. Alright, obviously what we're going to try to do here, and again this is the first time we're going to be making a flat geodetic tail where the stab has a high angle of sweep. If you go back and look at the 1200 sweeper plans from 1968, you'll see this is exactly, almost identically, the same shaped tail I used on that plane. And so we're going to borrow a little bit of that old technology. Casminato had a flat tail plane. Walker, of course, has a flat tail plane. A lot of the old Noblers that Gene Schaefer used to fly and John DeTavio were flat tail. So we're going to build this one with a flat tail. And what we're going to try to do is make one flat tail ship and one ship with a normal stabs. And then we'll obviously try to compare apples and oranges and bananas and whatever. And come up with no conclusion at all when we're finished. Now remember, earlier on in the video, a few videos back, we made these molded balsa pieces. We want to see if we can use these in a practical way. Again, I don't know if this is going to be a practical thing or not until we try to do it. So let's lay out some sheeting and see if we can do this. Okay, step one is I've obviously taped the plan down to the flat table, and I'm going to make up the bottom piece of sheeting. Now one of the advantages of doing it this way, one of the advantages is going to be that the grain goes tip to tip. The grain doesn't go on an angle back like it does on a foam wing. By going tip to tip, I hope we're going to get away with maximum strength and not have to sacrifice a lot of weight to get it, because a half-inch tail is really on the thin side for a full-size aeroplane. So what I'm going to do is basically just make up the bottom skin. Again, I'm just laying it out right over the plan. I have a Xerox copy of the plan that I've drawn up for the 93 Cardinal. And I'm using all 90-degree angles here. Getting that grain to go tip to tip with no center splice should add quite a bit of strength, and obviously when we're finished with it we'll know. So step one is just cut up the bottom sheet, and we can lay it right over the plan. We have to do this with more than one piece of wood. Now on a normal size tail you'd do one piece of wood, it wouldn't be a problem, as long as you don't have this. But this, because I said this is like the old 900 sweeper, 1200 sweeper, and we have a tremendous amount of rake. Because of that amount of rake in the leading edge, I've got to put a center line on this. Because of that rake in the leading edge, what we're going to have to do is splice two sheets together to get that extra little bit up in the front. So anyway, I'll do this off camera, and we'll come back to it when we have the bottom sheet done. Now again, remember, this is experimental construction techniques, so we're hoping we're going to, be able to go through it without a major problem. Okay, we have the major piece of sheeting that we need. Now I need to lay this right on a plan and get a center line right up the middle. Obviously, when you put the center lines in, you sure don't want to go by and gouge out the wood or weaken the wood in some way. So just put the lightest possible center line that you possibly can on here. We're using 4" by 16" wood. Now I'm going to put a connect the dot system here. Again, I'm working right off the plan. Now to get the center number, all I have to do is measure. In fact, I have a good ruler here. I can measure right up. It's 5 1/4. So just transfer that out onto the sheeting. Then we can just connect the dots. And what this will actually be the bottom sheeting for the stab, all in one piece. Because it's a flat tail, we can build it right on a table, just like we built the old sweeper, and boy was it easy to build. Okay, so I've drawn out. Obviously now I'm just going to cut this up. And I guess one of the things a lot of people have trouble with is building tails. It can be a real problem when all the compound curves are involved and everything. It can be a real nuisance. We're going to see if this way of building a tail is a practical way and what the weight is. Obviously it'll be all 16th, so it should be relatively light. Okay, now we have the piece of sheeting. Now notice how this piece of sheeting, this is the bottom skin of the stab. Now the next thing I want to do is transpose on all the angles. I want to get all the angles on here so I can lay out my ribs. Okay, and I want to obviously lay out the ribs here. So I get the center line on the center line, all the angles just right. Now I can lay right out on the wood itself where the geodetic ribs. Now obviously all the ribs are going to be exactly the same size in this type of construction. One of the reasons this is an attractive way to make a tail. Now I need to just slide this up just a bit, and I can pick up the point here where these are all going to connect. Okay, then it's a question of, because you need to plot where your ribs are going to go. And if you're laying this out on your own, obviously you want to shoot, the best angle for all geodetic work is roughly 30 degrees. If you do all your angles at 30 degrees, it'll be a pretty stiff system, pretty rigid. Okay, now you can see, and I'll try to lay that down, you can see that I have the rib locations on half of the tail, what would be a mirror image of the plan. Laid right out, plotted right on the sheeting itself. So I'll do the other part off camera. Okay, now I have the skin laid out with all the ribs on what will amount to be on the inside. I have all the rib locations. Now what I want to do is glue on the leading edge. That's the next step. Okay, I want to get a straight line on these little molded parts that we have. And what I have is a steel edge ruler here. I just want to, these are the parts that we formed with Windex. I want to try to get a straight line on these. Don't know if this is going to work. Again, a real good way to do this is just go get a piece of 3/8 wood and put this inside. Use this for the edge. Trying to do it without cutting all the way through, but I guess I can't. Okay, now that has the little curvature in it. Now obviously by looking straight down I can get the other side of this. Get the angles kind of equal. Just equal. Okay, what we wind up with is, it looks like a little gutter for a dollhouse. I'm going to tell my wife I can make gutters. Anyway, and now what we're going to do is try to get a nice flat edge on this. That will be the next step. Let's see, I don't know if we have this on the video here. Let's see if we can get this. We have that little sanding belt glued down at the table. Again, if you didn't want to use pre-formed parts, you could just make this piece out of a piece of solid 1/2 inch. Probably wouldn't have the strength. Let's see if we have it nice and flat. Nope. Okay, and just like we would do wing skins, get some straight edges on here. And obviously what we want to do is get a nice joint between the skin and the part. And then we're going to glue it up. Okay, you can see what we have. We have the first piece joined on. We just ran a little bead of hot stuff along it. Obviously now we're going to go down to the other side, put the other side on, get a nice smooth joint, run a nice bead of hot stuff inside, and we'll have the bottom sheet of our tail. Now we're basically finished with the plan for right now. So right now we want to get the table perfectly clean. We want to make sure we don't leave the impression that we work on a dirty table. To get all the glue joints, everything up off the table, we get this perfectly clean. And we're going to lay this out. We don't need the plan anymore. What we're going to do, see the way we left this oversized out at the tip? Now we can glue these tips right to the table. And we're finished. We just sawed them off. So make sure you have a clean table. Absolutely important that you're not gluing on top of glue on top of glue. Give myself a little room to work here. Again, this is why you leave the ends oversized. And by working right off a flat table like this, you would think you have a good chance of keeping the tail straight. Obviously no guarantees, but you will have a good chance. And what we'll do now is we don't even have to glue the sheeting down. The leading edge is pretty straight. We're just going to build this flat right on the table. Get in there and clean up that inside joint. Make sure everything is turned down. To leave a little bit of the sawdust on the table, it won't hurt a thing. It'll actually help gluing the ribs in. Now, obviously, the next step is we have to make a pattern up for a rib. Each rib is going to be, there'll be no taper in it, and then it'll have a round front. So we want to make up, and it'll be 3/8. So we want to go make up some ribs. Just do a little walk around here while we make up our rib template. Now what you need to know is the length of the longest rib. So we'll just kind of plot this out. I hope one of the things you're getting from the video is the idea of how to plot some of these things out. Okay, we know that the thickness is going to be 3/8. So we get a good ruler and measure up 3/8 here. Measure up 3/8. Connect the dots and put a 3/8 radius on the front of it. Now if you have a template, obviously you can do the 3/8. You're going to need a radius. I'll just do this by eye right now. I don't think it needs to be any fancier than this. And then we'll have a template for cutting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll make about 15 ribs. Now, you'll notice another thing. I'll just mention this on the video. I made up an extra piece. Always have an extra piece. An extra piece is handy if right now one of these happen to split, break, something crazy happens, you're not locked in. You have a spare piece. You don't have to wait till tomorrow to start working on it again. Obviously this will radius with a sanding block. Now you can see this is our template. We're going to cut up the 16th ribs and how it fits right into the leading edge. And obviously then we just trim off the back. Every rib is the same. Just do a little test fit here. And then we'll see, obviously, if this isn't enough ribs, then we'll add some ribs in between. But let's see for right now if this is going to be enough. We'll give this a try. Alright, so what we did, this is just a piece of scrap wood. This is the piece we have left over. We laid out our ribs on it. Having that template, we're making them all oversized, and obviously we'll trim them to fit. So the next thing is I'll get a brand new X-Acto and cut them out. Okay, now I stacked up. I made a few extra ribs, of course. Stack them down on the table nice and flat. And obviously we want to make sure they're all roughly the same size. Screw them up a little bit. Leave the dust on there because the dust will help kick off the hot stuff. I guess if you wanted to, you could put a few pins in there too. We'll make a little sanding block up. Get our radius in there. Okay, now we know we have the template. Now we know they're all relatively the same size. We can just spread them out. And we have our tail ribs. Okay, laying out the ribs. Obviously we have them all set up. We just go right over our pattern. They kind of lock into position. Now what I'm going to do is, as I do each one, I'm going to trim each one off, because the last thing we're going to do is attach the trailing edge here. That's the last thing we're going to do, is the trailing edge. So I want to trim each one down. So obviously that's rib number 1. Make sure we're not building in some kind of a twist here. You don't want to get any glue dripping over the edge of the table and gluing this tail to the table any more than it already is. Okay, so we'll line everything up. Now I decided to put in a couple of X ribs down in the middle to stiffen this up. Obviously I'm taking a sanding block and just truing up all the ribs now before we make up the other sheet. Get everything nice and flat. Okay. Now we're going to clear the deck a little bit and make up the top skin. Now if you have that sanding bar, this is a good time to just sight down the whole thing. Pick out all the high spots. In this case we only have one. Make sure you're touching all the ribs. Okay, we're ready to put that skin on. Now, sometimes it's a little bit of a job to get that skin laid out. First thing we want to do is start with a piece of wood that has a straight edge on it. So if you've gone back and seen the other videos, you know how we get a straight edge on this. Now what I like to do to get this skin to line up just right is I use this angle here and just trace it right off. Trace it right off the piece of wood that we're going to go on. Do the same thing out at the other tip. And you can see, I don't know if you're keeping track of this, you can see and this whole thing takes less than an hour to make. You can really knock one of these out in a hurry, mainly because it's flat. And if you use this technique, nothing secret about this technique, you can really get a tail together in a hurry. The only thing is it's a flat tail, and if you ever had an aerodynamic tail, of course it would be different. Okay, so we have a rough idea. Now the only thing left to do here is going to be to get the joint. The main thing you gain from having a flat tail is you have one piece of wood going tip to tip. You don't have the strength on an angle. Alright, now I'm going to take the same piece of wood, get a flat joint in this, and the idea here is don't glue it to the glass, needless to say. What I like to do is glue half of it and then make it, just keep moving it as it's on the glass. Now see, by doing it this way, you have half of the angle that you need on there already. Boy, I love kicker. This kicker is the worst junk. No, it's empty. My fault. Sorry. Anyway, if you run out of kicker, a little bit of sanding dust will kick that right off. Flip it over. Okay, and obviously now what we want to do is come back to the piece, and let's see, we'll cut it just a little bit oversized. Try to pick up that angle right there. Pick up the angle off the other angle. Okay, now we see we still have a little bit of, plus we cut this oversized, we still have a little bit of angle to take up. Try it the other way and see which way. Okay, it's going to go this way. Okay, now in this case, we only have to cut one side. What we're going to do is trim one side, get a straight edge on one side, not totally straight yet. Okay, now we want to recut the other angle. Now what you need to do is line up the ruler parallel to the piece that you want to cut. Okay, and you have that piece cut now. Now we're just going to go through and tack glue it on. Now what it's a good idea to do at this time is just be real fussy, go along, take out all the little high spots. You want to get a nice joint to that leading edge. Try to get it as neat as possible, obviously. Get a nice joint. Okay. What I want to do, I got the slow drying jet here, which is really getting to be a nuisance. This stuff is really awful to work with. Now obviously go right along each one. This gives you a minute working time. We leveled these ribs all out, so we should have relatively straight, stiff tail. Now what's nice so far, this is a prototype of course, and we're working through this together. I had to put the extra ribs in by the middle. I didn't like the span between the sheeting. I thought there'd be big bellies in the sheeting. So we added a couple of grams of extra rib at the center only. If you were going to tissue this, obviously it would be lighter, but it wouldn't be as rigid, and one of the things I really want out of this tail is for it to be rigid. Now I'm trying to press this up toward the leading edge because I'm not gluing the leading edge at this time. I'm just pressing it down toward the leading edge while this slow stuff kicks off. Maybe on the next one of these we build, we'll lay all the ribs out in X's. I think that's going to be a better choice than just having the geodetic rib pattern, but we'll save that for a future tail. Okay, as soon as that glue starts to tack up real quick, now what I do now is I take the thin and get along the leading edge, try to get it lined up, get it tacked into position. The dust from the Q-tips will kick the CA off. Go down about 2 inches, make sure it's level. If it's not level, this is probably the hardest part of building the whole tail, is getting this seam to come out nice. And the rest of the seam seems to be right in order. Seam seems to be, that's cool. Again, the dust from the Q-tips kicks it off. I can see already on future ones ways I can save time is I can probably cut both skins at the same time. Would probably save some time in the building process. Again, we level out the sheeting because you don't want to sand that leading edge all paper thin or anything. That leading edge is doing a lot of work. And I think at this point, you see you've invested very little time, almost no material at all. In fact, you can almost use up scrap balsa on 90% of this. And we'll probably wind up with a halfway decent tail. Obviously, the next step is going to be that we're going to pull this off the board, get inside and get all the glue joints nice and straight before we glue on the trailing edge. We'll go find a nice light piece of 1/4 inch for the trailing edge. Alright, obviously next step is we're going to get a brand new single edge razor and crack all the hot stuff off of this and pull it up off the table. From this angle here it looks like it's perfectly straight. I left the sheeting hanging out a little bit here, so I'll have to block sand this in. have trouble getting up the little bits of CA from this, just take a little rag with some acetone on it. In this case, it's coming right up. We'll clean off the table here. Now, in case you pull up a little chunk of balsa wood when you pull up the CA, anything bigger, say, than you feel is reasonable to patch with DAP, or if it's in a spot where you need strength, obviously the trick right now is go back and make a little balsa patch. Now, one of the reasons this happened to stick as much as it did here is because I don't have the right tip on the glue. Midgley's bringing me down some good tips. The little Teflon tube tips. But anyway, we do have the part made. We'll clean up the table and final sand it. A couple of stubborn spots we have here, we'll just soak them up with acetone. Now, it's real important if you're going to do the kind of construction techniques that we're showing on these videos, you obviously have to have not only a flat, good glass table, you need a clean table. You can't have big glocks of hot stuff and CA and epoxy all over the place. So if it seems like I'm overdoing this point of cleaning the table, I'm not. It's important to have that table crystal clear when you're going to do quality work. Even one little block of hot stuff or epoxy can ruin a part or cause you hours of extra time. So I'm trying to emphasize over and over, clean table, spend the time. That is what the acetone does, is soften up the epoxy and the CA, and you can come by and just polish it up with Windex. But you can't do quality work when you have a table all full of little glitches and glocks and whatever. Okay, now I have the part off. Now what I'm going to do, of course I have the back off of this, is just drip down one drop of CA down on each rib. Whatever you can see, this will bond it to the leading edge real nice too. And now that I have the part off the table, I see how rigid it is. I'm glad I put the extra little ribs in there. A tail does a lot of the work of flying the airplane, and a rubber tail really is. Ask Jimmy Casale. He made a plane one time, and it really was a terrible performer. And he went home, pulled off all the tissue, and sheeted the tail with 16th. And the plane turned into a very competitive plane. Needed to have the tail stiffened up. Don't delude yourself thinking a tail doesn't do any work. It's just an ornament. It's not a hood ornament. It does a lot of work. I'm trying to get all the seams cleaned up here, and I'm getting one nice headache from this CA too. Got to get Midgley to give me some tips for this CA. Doesn't really matter, we're going to clean it all up anyway. My kingdom for a bottle of kicker that would work. Jeez, what junk. There we go. Kick that all off. Now obviously we need a piece of 1/4 inch for the trailing edge here. That's the next step. We want to true that trailing edge up with 1/4 inch. Now a good way to true up the tips, because we have a rib on the end of each tip, is get it right on a glass table, almost up to the end, and block sand it in. And just come right up on the rib, touch the rib, but don't go any further. Lets you get right up even with the rib so we can get the block on. Now obviously the other thing you want to check right now, check that you have your 90 degree. Now, good thing here, this tip, we never got a good glue joint on this when we glued this top piece in. So what I'm going to do is go tack this down right now with some CA before I sand this out. The glue never got into that joint. Okay, we got a weight of 29.5 grams on the tail, on the stab without tips. 29.5 grams. That's just for a reference. That's about average. It's not super light. Obviously this would be a lot lighter if it was tissued, but we're not looking for a tissue airplane here. And one of the penalties is the sheeting on the tail. Alright, so we're going to pick this up tomorrow with making the elevators and attaching the trailing edge and whatever, and tips, all the other goodies. Tomorrow's another day and we'll be back. Okay, the next thing we did was we filled in some of the little bad spots. Alright, phone call over, sorry for the interruption. I put a little bit of DAP on all of the little spots that I want to sand in, and I glued this right to a piece of trailing edge. Now this is the piece of trailing edge, obviously, one of the pieces we had left over from doing up the wing trailing edge. So nothing goes to waste here at Cheapo headquarters. Okay, so next step is we're going to carve the trailing edge in and sand this guy in. Okay. Obviously the next step, I put some DAP on here, I let that dry overnight. And I want to, using a Zona saw, trim off the trailing edge. Anytime you have to cut against the grain of the wood, use a Zona saw. The other side looks pretty clean. I'll get a nice sharp 26 blade. Again, this is the wood that we used from the wing jig, wing fixture. And the trick here, don't try to take it all off in one piece. Take strips. Now, I was just thinking last night, if we tend to make more of these tails, we could make up a little stripper to strip out the ribs, like the razor blade you use when you cut cap strips. Well, we could make one up that would go the thickness of the tail, which is 3/8, and we could strip that whole thing down. We could just strip ribs off one by one, and then all I'd have to do is radius off the front edge. Still have a little bit of glue on here. And obviously then, okay, I'll finish stripping this off. Obviously the next thing is going to be to block sand in any of the spots where the glue pulled up a little chunk of wood. So far this looks like, and it's amazingly rigid. You know, I'm really impressed how rigid this is. Anything you do geodetic is going to be rigid in the torque dimension. Okay, so I'll finish the rest of this off camera and we'll come back to it. Okay, we have it all block sanded down nice and flat here. Filled in a couple of the bad spots that we had with DAP. Just one last spot I didn't see there. Vacuum up the sawdust, and obviously we have a center line on the trailing edge. Now what we're going to do is put a round edge on the trailing edge similar to this, because we want to try to have the elevators removable same way as the wing. And we're going to try, obviously this is a prototype thing, we're going to see how that's going to work out. Now, two things are apparent to me after doing this. One thing is I'm real happy with how easy this is to build. I really get the feeling anybody could put this together in a matter of about 2 hours and have a nicely sanded out part, and within the weight limits that we all feel are okay. Let me get the phone here. Okay, back to our project. Mr. Midgley doing his check-in call in the morning here. Okay, back to what I was saying is, it seems like this is not only real easy to build, and I remember this from sweeper days,
how handy it was to just be able to lay it flat on a table and sand it out. Not only that, I think this is going to come out to be, you know, well within the weight limit that we all would be happy with. And it's really stiff in this dimension. You could make an ironing board out of this. Alright, so, and it's all sheeted, so finishing it should be really a piece of cake. Should be no problem at all. So next step is going to be, we're going to round off the trailing edge. And anybody knows, you know, the old tricks from some of the previous videos. Just take a 45-degree cut. We have the center line on there. Take a nice 45-degree cut out. And do the rest with sandpaper, 220 grit, and a block, and you'll get a nice even, real nice even radiused edge. And hopefully we're going to get our elevators with a radiused edge too, so they'll match the wing. Obviously we don't want to have this start to look like a gypsy airplane with parts from who knows what, parts from Toys R Us on it. You know, one of the things that's always important to me is that the airplane look like it's, you know, it matches, the parts match, the trim matches. It can't just be a collection of parts like an Edsel. It's got to be, you know, a matching set of parts. So, okay, what I'm going to do is put this on the edge of the glass table now, because it's flat. This is real handy and easy to do. And just sand that edge right in. And you'll see that in a matter of 3 minutes you have the edge all carved in and you're pretty much ready to go. So if time of construction is an important thing to you, you might want to consider a flat tail. Now obviously one of the other choices is to take this same technology that we just used, and instead of using sheeting, do a leading and trailing edges and cap strips, and kind of improvise up your own little way of constructing things. Okay, not too painful. Okay, so we're going to final sand this guy out with 400 and go on to the next step. Now I'm ready to put the horn in here. I always like the silver side of the bushing in, even though I've never seen one fall out that's been pressed in. They're done on a press. I like to use Stay Bright silver side. I want to show you a good trick. This is Flux Neutralizer. You make this is a Jim Damarel tip, and he knows about this kind of stuff through his job. You mix up baking soda and water, and just dunk it in there for a minute or so. And it kills off all the sulfuric acid that's in the Stay Bright. You'll see it's bubbling up already. You don't even have to wipe it off. I'm just stirring the baking soda in the bottom of the jar. Just water and baking soda will neutralize that joint. And like I said, all I did was just get the silver solder around the bushing. I like to have a little silver solder around there. Then I'll take a precision 3/32 drill and run it through the hole. Because in this part of the system I have all the slop that I want in the main horn. In this horn I don't want any slop in. So that's a good little trick, worth its weight in gold. Flux Neutralizer, all your silver solder joints. Okay, I installed the horn in a normal way, same as the wing. Put the little strips of carbon fiber around it, and also a little strip right in front of the horn. The idea of this is so this will not crack in time as oil and everything works its way in there. I don't want to see that crack develop. I've seen many planes fold the tail. Mike Rogers had one almost fold on him. They crack right in front of the horn. That's the weakest spot, so I put a little carbon fiber there in this case. And I got it sanded out a little bit, and we're ready to go on to the next step. I just want to show this on a video. I went out and picked this up. This is a Prasanna razor scraper, and it's got a 5-inch razor blade. And what I was doing, I was scraping a table before, and I broke a blade, and I come pretty close to cutting my finger off. So went out at lunchtime, went out and bought this really neat tool, and this holds a 5-inch razor blade in its little jaws, and I guess this is used for scraping paint or whatever. I can't imagine yeah, it's a paint scraper. Anyway, what I'm doing with this now, it comes with 5 blades. It cost about $7-8. Is scraping a glass table, and boy, does this do a job. I can do the job that used to take me about 10 minutes. Done. That table is whistle clean now. So, just thought I'd pass this little tip along to you. If you're going to be building off a glass table, this is one tool you want to have in inventory. I'll put that up on the wall for future reference. That is really a handy tool. Now what I did, I built one elevator off camera just to see if it was going to go the way I expected it to. It came out even better than I thought it would. So what I'm going to do now, obviously, is show it on camera. This I assume is a way, very, very nice way. It's a very rigid way of building it. Probably not too creative, but it does work well. And I'll show how I did that. That's going to be the next step, is to make the mirror image of that elevator. Now, the first thing you want to do is get out the set of plans. Get out the old pen. We're hopefully going to have, this is the last piece of C-grain sheeting I have, so I'm hoping I'm going to at least get one elevator out of it. It would be nice if you could use all C-grain, but what I want to do is line it up right on the plan itself. And I'm allowing a 1/4 inch for the leading edge. I originally was going to use 3/8. I changed that to be 1/4 inch. So the first thing I want to do is get that dimension sliced in. Now, a big part of this, with an extra ruler, a big part of this is figuring out how to make up these dimensions for ribs and things like that. If you know how to figure it out, and I'm going to try to do that on video, if you know how to do that, well, the rest of it is pretty simple. So step one is, obviously, there's a problem here, is if you were to build, and I'm going to go over this, if you were to build a tapered flap flat on a table, and it went from 3 inches to 1 inch, you would be building in a warp. So this only has a 1/4 inch of taper in the back end, so we can get away with it. If we had 1 inch or more of taper, you're not going to be able to build it this way without building in a warp. This, but believe it or not, you have to even take into account that 1/4 inch when you glue it flat to the table. If this was a 3 to 3, you could build it flat on the table. There'd be no problem. As it tapers, you tend to build a twist into it. So picture that in your mind, or go build a test sample. You only can build these kind of elevators when you're dealing with a relatively flat, and there's no taper in this leading edge. This is going to be a solid 1/2 inch leading edge. Okay, I'm going to go back to this. I drew up where my sheeting is going to end, and I just want to check with the elevator before I build this up. Make sure I haven't. Okay, I've got it straight. All right, then what I want to do is I want to move this sheeting up off the plan and mark where the ribs are going to come together. And again, you can do this more or less by eye. This is not a, like if it's off by 1/8 inch, nobody's going to care or know. It's not that scientific of a thing. Now, what you need to do is you need to know, let's get this out of here right now. We'll just sketch in the lines. So what we're going to actually have is the plan drawn on the back, a drawing of the elevator drawn right on the back here. And then we want to plot out the ribs. Now, what I did on the first elevator is I just cut all the ribs oversized and sanded them in. And that way is a little bit tedious. I think I can do it a little bit better the way I'm going to show you now. I think this will work out a lot neater and cleaner, a little less labor. Now you can see what we need here is we need 2 end ribs, and we need 1, 2, 3, 4 normal ribs. And they're all going to start out up here at 3/8 and end at 0. 3/8, end at 0. 3/8, end at 0. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a piece of wood, get a straight edge on it first of all. And you can plot any rib in a geodetic surface this way. And we'll just do one, to start with. We know that up at this end, right here, it's going to be 3/8. And down here it's going to be, we'll leave a little wood so we can grind it down. So I'll get out my scale, measure up 3/8 inch over here. add a little bit on here so we can sand it down. And then it's just a question of connecting the dots. And now I have that rib. I figured out it's going to be 3/8 at that dimension, almost 0 here. Plot up the 3/8, bring it down with a straight line, and you can make up all the geodetic ribs really. In a matter of 5 or 10 minutes, you'll have all the ribs cut out anyway. And it's a simple question of, I'll use a straight edge on this, but I will block sand these in. I'm still cutting them a little bit oversized, and I will block sand it in. So that would be one of the ribs that you need. And obviously we'll make the same calculation in 4 ribs. The end ones will be a lot shorter. Okay? Now, first thing, what I did with the other one, and it worked well, I glued the piece of sheeting to the table. And I'll do that now. Minimum amount of glue. Don't have to glue the thing to the moon here. And like I said, the only reason we can get away with this is because there's only 1/4 of an inch of taper in this. I just don't want it to be like a Vico Chief. I want it to have a little bit of taper. Okay, that's glued right to the table now. Now we just start with whichever rib you want to start with. And this is a good little trick now, if you don't want to spend your whole life with kicker, is get some sawdust on the surface, get it good and dusty, and leave the dust right on the surface. You leave the dust right on the surface, and it acts as the kicker. Now another trick too is don't get a lot of glue. I don't have one of the good tips. Midgley's bringing good tips down. Don't get a lot of CA down under the sheeting or you'll ruin the part. You really just, right at this point in time, you need a minimum of CA on there. And that dust should kick it off without a problem. Okay, again, just to keep, from being boring, I'll do the other ribs off camera so that we have all the ribs and the end ribs in place, and then we'll block sand them down. You can see it doesn't take long, and you can shape this right into place. Now another way to do this obviously is to set up a stripper gauge so you can strip off some 3/8 wood, which is definitely a good choice. In other words, just strip off a piece of 3/8 wood like this and use the 3/8 wood. Again, if you build a few of these, you'll find some shortcuts, just like obviously everybody does. And in my own case, I don't build the same every year. I try to change the construction, so I'm constantly trying new things. Keeps it a little more exciting than just doing the same thing over and over, like watching the same movie over and over. Now in this case, I don't want to get glue on the edge of the table. I'm going to try to glue this guy down this way. Just remember, you just take the length you need and the height you need. And as long as you don't have a tremendous taper in it, I'd say the maximum would be probably 1/4 inch, maybe even 3/8 of an inch you could get away with here. If you don't have more than 3/8 of an inch of taper, you could probably use this way and not be building in much of a warp. Okay, so I'm going to get the last rib in here. And again, nothing too scientific here. You can kind of just run right down, plot the rib sizes. Make sure they're all, now this one is too small. I want to make sure I don't lose any of the height that I want here. Anyway, once you see the technique, once you see the little technique for plotting the ribs, there's all kind of shortcuts you'll figure out on your own, I'm sure. You'll also probably figure a way of, for instance, one of the things that I thought of doing is doing this not with 16th wood, but with, I have some wood that's 75 thousandths there. Maybe that would be a big help, I don't know. Now I thought of a way we could improve this already, is when you build this from the leading, since we only have glue up here, put a piece of wax paper or this Teflon paper that Midgley sells right underneath here. And then this would, well, this one worked out well. This has a little drop of glue down here. This should be free, but with attached down in the front. Now we want to block sand this down. Now if I look from where I am now, I can look right down the part and see when I'm coming up on getting them all even. You want to sand the back just a little bit so you get the two sheets to bind together. And obviously when you finish, take a little ruler and just go by and see that they're all even. Looks like that one's up a little higher than it should be. I think if you try building this way, you build a ship this way, what you're going to do, you're going to like building it, because this really does go together nice and easy. I'm really surprised just how easy it goes together. Plus, an advantage of building this way is because you have an all-sheeted surface, you don't have to deal with silk span and open bays and all that stuff. You can go right into the finish without a lot of problems. Okay, now the next step is going to be take what's left of our quarter grain, cut up a wing skin here, and just glue it right on. Now remember one of the keys, you want to have the grain running parallel to the trailing edge. You don't want the grain running here and then tapering the trailing edge. You want the grain parallel to the trailing edge. That gives you the best warp resistance. Get rid of some of the dust. Get out some slow CA. And since another thing, you can build this whole thing up with CA. I was timing the first one. The first one took a little over an hour to make. So this one I'm assuming is going to take about half of that amount of time, since I already have figured out in my mind pretty much how I want to do this. Get a little bead along the trailing edge and try not to get it under the skin. And this is old, good, basic, old free flight technology, old RC technology. I don't know what it is. It's good basic modeling technology, that's for sure. Nothing's reinvented here. Now, as you're installing that, you can just kind of press it down. The dust that's in there will help pick off the hot stuff. Might want to help it along a little bit. Now right down here, these ribs don't overlap exactly right, so we'll just trim that off. And just trim the skin right here, right along the line that we had scribed on. One super light elevator. Oh, super light. It flies away when you let go of it. Okay, now we come back to that thing of why do we have the ice scraper? Done. Where before that was really a dangerous job. using razor blades, and I have had them break in my hand too. Scrape the table with the old scraper. That's a trick I think if you try, you're probably going to say, I don't need that $5 tool. Once you try it once, you'll run right out and buy it. Send me a letter of thank you. Okay, next step is when I get out the sanding belt. Check that we have all the edges 90 degrees. We're pretty close here, I can tell just by looking. And we're ready to glue on the 1/4-inch cap. Let's take a 1-minute break. I want to show you something here. Outside the shop I have this box of scrap balsa. This is all scraps. Now, but the thing is, it's all scrap 4 to 6 pound wood. This is all prime wood that I've cut up and clipped up and whatever. So now I need a piece for that cap. I don't have to go cutting up a $3 piece of wood to make a cap. I can go out to my scrap box, come back to the table, and I have a piece of scrap that's exactly the right size and 4 to 6 pound wood. Alright, we have that sanded nice and flat. I just like to line this up a little bit off of where we intend to have it so I have some room to sand and carve. Run that bead of hot stuff up there. Press it down. Now, by pressing it down this way, you also ensure a nice straight hinge line. If you just glue this on in midair, you're not going to get the benefit of having a flat surface. The structure is you're like putting this in under pressure now and getting that hinge line perfectly straight, and that'll be important because obviously we want to have removable elevators if possible here, unless something comes up that changes my mind. I'd like to have the tail just like the flaps removable. That would allow me to make bigger and smaller elevators, tweak horns, do a lot of cute little stuff without a lot of extra work. Okay, the other thing, just lay down a bead. Position it real nice. When you think you have it just right, hit it with kicker. Now the rest I'll final trim and sand. Again, here I'll take small shavings off, trim this all out. I can do that off camera just to save some tape. And we've got an elevator made, less than an hour. Okay, we're just putting the leading edge, the round leading edge on here. One of the things that's come in handy is and I'll show it on the video, is the shaping block for getting the rough shape in. Remember that old shaping block I showed with all the concave cuts? Well, there's one that's just about right. There it is. Just about right, but it leaves it rough. This is like 80 grit paper. So you can get the shape with that. Then you have to get the final last little bit with the old sanding bar. real soon to cut the, I don't know if we're going to get to do it today or tomorrow, because obviously there's other work to do around here. Next step will be to do the hinging and the pocket for the horn, the little piece of tubing for the horn, and set up some more of those brand X hinges. Same way we did the wing. We're going to try to do it same way we did the wing. See how that works out. That is definitely a nice, easy way to make elevators. And we got 2 elevators here. They're sanded out. Guess we'll clean up the table now, and whatever time we have left, work on the hinges. All right, now here's another little thing we did to save some time and energy. Well, we're going to put this aside to dry pretty soon for the night. I glassed up the middle, pretty much the same as we did on the wing. 1 layer of cloth. The epoxy where one tube is bigger than the other. Now obviously one of the reasons for doing this is tonight this can be drying. Tomorrow when I come in, or the next day, Midgley's going to be here the next couple of days, I can at least clean this up. This will be drying over the period of time that I have it setting aside, and it'll sand out like butter. Now if I go to sand this out later on, a couple hours from now, obviously it's not going to sand out. It's going to take very long. By putting this aside to dry for 2 or 3 days now, it'll make the sanding of it almost an automatic, almost like a 5-minute job. Then obviously the next thing is we're going to work on the hinges. Now I did the hinges up the same as on, and no sense putting this stuff on the video twice. The glassing is the same, the hinges are the same. I'm going to start laying out the hinges, 3 hinges in each side, and start working that up whatever time I have left today. It's getting late, I may get to work on the hinges for a while, and that's it. Now I had a little bit of time before I had to leave tonight, so what I did, I set the outside, the little tubes, and I wanted to show this. What I did, I glued the tube right to here and then surrounded it with end grain balsa, of course. Got all finished. Now I want to set up the outside one for my Rabe rudder linkage. I have a little piece of copper tubing hooked to the wire, so of course this rotates now. Then I cut a little trough in here right up to the point where it hits the aluminum tube, and I'll epoxy that right in there. I'll show this on the macro lens too, so you can get a little rough idea. Need a little more than 90 degrees here to get this angle even. And what it is, now I have it set, so what's nice about using this, I'll show this up on a macro lens here. Now you want that tube to sit down so it almost touches, it just touches the aluminum tube, but don't saw through the tube that the elevator horn's going into. And obviously you want this flush, and then we'll just put a little piece of scrap balsa over the top of it and fill it in. This is probably one of those questions most people ask the most is about Rabe rudders. I don't know why that isn't better understood. Anyway, so we're going to attach that right now, make that a permanent, and then fill in the other elevator horn. Make sure you don't glue it up shut. That's another thing. I put a drop of grease on that just before I put it in, so I don't get hot stuff in there and get the rod tight. And then we'll work on the other elevator. Got about another 15 minutes here before I gotta go. Glass is drying up. Got the little pocket for the horn. So this actually was a big step forward. And I got all my little hinges cut up here too.
Now when you want to cover that little cap up, that's all epoxied in and nice. You can see the little wire turning. Okay, then you just make up a little scrap balsa cap, soft balsa, press it right in, a couple of drops of CA. And by pushing that balsa down, you get a nice tight fit. Keep working that rod. And obviously we'll sand this in. And put a little bit of glass cloth on top of it, or double silk span, as the case may be. Okay, we sanded that all in nice. I run a little bit of thin CA along the whole edge so that the edge of the wood is hardened up as it comes into the this is 64th plywood on the edge. And I've got that rod nice and free there. Blended this in. Obviously put a little DAP or whatever up here, some epoxy. And we'll smooth this right in, and we'll probably glass the edge of this so it won't be it won't even be a one chance in a million that this is going to come apart after 10 years of service. Yeah, that's about it to getting your Rabe rod. Remember, you want this as close to the horn as possible and 1/8 of an inch back. And that's your two magic numbers you can work with.
All right. How's that?
Now we're going to be doing a little repair today on Don Patterson's plane. You can see what happened is a bicycle went into the wing of the plane. And it put a nice hole. This is a foam wing, so obviously you can't use any CA on it. And what we did, we took the hair dryer, got some epoxy real thin, troweled it in and forced it down. How's that thing by the flap drying up? Put some DAP.
Good, we're good.
Good thing you don't ride motorcycles. Maybe you... Jeez. Get hit with a bicycle.
Don't ride your bicycle in the living room.
Yeah, don't ride the bike in wild sex games with Don and Sherry. Alright, and this guy, we got to... What happened to him? The tail is broken here. Let me see on a...
We're going to fix the tail.
Pull that away so you can show what we got to do on this tail here. Oh, the whole thing opened up. Okay. Got a big crack. Alright, so we're probably going to sand that down. Now, here's one of the things, you know, and I know there's a lot of people, I've gotten a lot of nice letters already about, hey, I know I can fix planes now. One of the things we hope we're going to be able to show is on this one anyway, is to try to, we're going to add another stripe to the paint job, hopefully to cover up where this, you know, repair is, and hopefully not destroy the whole paint job in doing it. So we got to start thinking about now what color we're going to try to use and how we're going to blend it in, of course. And that's always one of the best tricks, is just find a way of hiding a mistake, I guess is the right way. Fudging, or whatever Lou Dudka used to say, fudging it. And sometimes it's harder to fudge it than to do it the right way.
Now we got to remove the red paint from the bicycle too.
Yeah, yeah. And then, lesson number 2, don't ride your bicycle. When you have your girlfriend over the apartment, stay in the bedroom. Don't come out where the planes are. Unbelievable. All right, let's get into this repair. Now what we did, we heated up some epoxy. I guess if you went back to the original repair video, this would be, you know, the same thing. We heated up some epoxy, got in the whole crack, heated it up, let it soak in, and we taped the fuselage. and then tape the tail in position. Obviously the next step we're going to have to wet sand this all down. There's also a crack up here, and while you're doing maintenance on a plane, you're cracking a fillet. He had a broken prop on takeoff one time here. What you want to do is, while you're doing maintenance like this, look all around for little spots, little dings, little things that you can sand out now and do the touch-up on, and you know, try to do it all at once, as long as it's in the shop here for a repair. You know, make it like a brand new plane when it's finished. Now we did the same thing here. We put some hot epoxy in the joint. You can't use any hot stuff because this is a foam wing. Let it soak in. We're letting it dry, cook off for another hour before we actually start the repair. Had some big chunks taken out of the flap when I guess the bicycle went into the airplane. That's funny. The big sweeper, the 1200, actually met its death in the garage when somebody drove a motorcycle into it. They had a 3-wheel Harley and were fooling around with the transmission, and nobody was riding it. And they jumped into gear, went 2 feet, and smashed into the plane. So accidents happen to everybody, whatever. And no one had to fix the planes up like we're doing right now. I guess every one of the planes you see here, our wing is in silver today, and the Red Barons had many repairs. Okay, the epoxy is almost dry here. We've let this sit for about an hour. This is on the red guy. In the first step, obviously, we forced in some hot epoxy down into this crack. The first step now is going to be to roughen up the whole area around it and get on some filler. Okay, the DAP has dried on the flap, and this is just a typical chunk that's taken out of the flap. So I've sanded that smooth with a block, of course. Now I'm going to put a couple of drops of hot stuff on it, and then sand it back out, and then start with the red lead. Try to get a nice substrate on it before I go on to the next step. And this is pretty redundant. We've seen all of this before on the, I don't know what tape it is, a tape where we repaired Gunder's plane and the yellow plane, but try to get as much of this information on video, so if you have to do a repair, you can at least go back, look at the videos, and have a fighting chance of making it look like brand new. Now the object of putting the CA on is where you have the DAP, and the DAP is drying, and all these little, and this plane has a lot of these little spots. Great. I love these hot stuff jars. I'm sure nobody else ever has this problem beside me. Anybody ever invents a CA jar that doesn't clog up, send me 100 regardless of the price. Anyway, we just want to get one drop on there. Sometimes it's easier just to put it on the Q-tips and then rub it on. Now what the Q-tips does is it hardens up the DAP. It hardens it up roughly to almost the consistency of the surface around it. So you have a fighting chance of block sanding this guy in where you won't see it. The length from the Q-tips, and this lets you get on one nice thin layer instead of having one big giant glob of it, while having it run all underneath the flap and everything. Alright, and we're going to block sand that out, obviously. Get a block and some 400. Now in this case, of this repair, we're going to try to figure out some kind of, maybe like a stiletto stripe on the flap to try to blend this in. Okay,
back to get the trowel out, get some nitrous stain out, just a little bit here. Try to get on a nice smooth even layer. And this will have to dry now for roughly a half an hour or so before we can sand it down. And in the meantime we'll start patching that center of the wing, where the bicycle went through the wing. This guy must have some wild sex life, boy. I don't know, I don't drive bicycles around my airplanes. Anybody rides a bike around here is a dead man. They're signing a death certificate. Now one thing it's handy to have when you're doing this kind of repairs, I just took a little jar of whatever this is, filled it up with acetone, and when you do this kind of repair you can dip your fingertips in there, clean them up on a rag, a blanket, anything, or on your pants or your underwear, and keep your fingertips nice and clean, because it's your fingertips that are going to spread oil all around. You can use this for like a little cleaning bowl. And again, like when you do your trowel, you can dunk the trowel right in there, clean it right up, get all the epoxy off. A little jar of acetone around a repair like this is a good idea. Obviously don't get any acetone on the repair, it'll eat the paint up. Now I mixed up some ordinary Bondo body putty. Mixed it up in the same way, put a little layer of it right over the repair. Nice thin flat layer with the trowel. Now obviously this has to dry 10-15 minutes before we go on to the next step, and then we'll obviously block sand it out. And you don't try to rush this, it takes time. Okay, we're at the point in the repair here. Don went out for lunch, so I think I'm going to get this work done while he's gone. Using the M600, the Sickens, and just block sanding in that body filler. .600 sandpaper, block fill it in nice and neat and easy. You got to go out into the outside areas just a little bit. Now one of the good things, the M600 decontaminates everything when you're doing this, so you don't wind up, it gets rid of obviously all the grease that's in the area. And the reason for putting the heat on is if there's a little bit of the degreasing agent down in there anywhere, it brings it to the surface. Before you put the nitrous stain on, you get out the old nitrous stain. Hey, by the time you finish with this video, you can fix anything. Again, just a little bit. You want to use the minimum amount, trowel it on, smooth. Now what's good too on this plane, while we're doing this, we're going to run around and put a little more trim on it. Fancy it up a little bit. It's kind of a plain Jane paint job. And while we're going to add some striping and some stuff, somewhere down the road, we're only going to work on this one day, and then Don's going to take it home and do a lot of the work at home. One of the things we're going to do is try to busy up the paint job, fancy up the paint job a little bit. Okay, if the flap now is ready for paint, the red lead will have to dry 15-20 minutes. Now this part of the repair, because the body was split all the way from the flap hinge line to the back here, the epoxy, we heated some epoxy, poured it down in there, taped the fuselage together. Working on a spot when the bicycle hit this plane. I can't believe this guy, bicycles. Anyway, when the bicycle hit this, it broke the flap horn, and of course the 1/8-inch horns don't bend at all. It broke right out the back. So we put a little fiberglass in there and some red lead. We're going to be working on that later. I guess the handlebars hit the rudder here. Trying to estimate. This flap's already been repaired. We made like a fake walkway in the middle of the summer when I think they were trying to tweak flaps. I don't remember. Somebody was helping them tweak flaps, and
1/8" horns do not tweak. Anyway, we did a lot of little touch-ups here, a lot of little spots on the back of this flap. We got some work to do out by this wingtip. In by the other flap, there's some touch-up to be done. And we're going to work on this now. You know, basically the way we did the yellow plane. This is going to be a 2-day project. Don's going to take this home tonight and let it cook for, I guess, a week or so before he'll be able to get back here. And then we're going to try to do the paint work on another day. This is not a good day for paint. It's raining outside.
I'm so happy for it. $1,000 in cash on the way.
Then we got this one drying up, the final dry. This will be a perfect repair. We'll have to repair the whole wing, that whole panel really, into the lettering and everything. So we'll try to finish that up. And I'll try to get some of this, you know, on the video at least. It seems like of all the videos that I've ever done, the ones that are the most popular by far are the ones showing how to repair planes. And all of them seem to be very well received. I've gotten really a lot of letters, like I said before, a lot of letters back from people saying, yeah, now that we've seen how to do it, it's really no big deal to repair these planes. So between the ones we did this summer, and we'll try to get the other ones, of course, this is just more information you can put to good use in your shop. Midgley's down here, and he's getting ready to build a new fuselage. 1993 plane. One of the jobs we're trying to do today is Dave's making up fuselage sides here, and we're trying to get a plywood template for all the integral parts of the cardinal, so we can reproduce them rather quickly. Because so many people, Russ, Damarel, etc., etc., and Woody will be making a 51 cardinal. It's going to be nice to have a plywood template just so we can cut these out without a lot of extra work, and that's the project we're working on now. We also made up the crutch. Where's that crutch, Dave? Oh, here. Also made up the crutch. And we're going to get ready to assemble the body sides here momentarily, as soon as Dave gets done truing up the sides. What we did, we have a plywood template now for the Cardinal 51 fuselage side. And we have, by the end of the day, we hope we'll have, oh, how are they looking? Good? We'll have a plywood part so we can reproduce these without a lot of problem. Kind of like having the parts of a kit prefabbed. Now we also have a plywood template for the doubler, so we can make the doubler up real quick, the fuse side real quick, and we already have the crutch made up. So it won't be long, and we'll have ourselves the bones of a body here. And when you have everything on plywood, the object is from year to year you can go back and see, make minor adjustments and changes, which obviously is what we're doing to the 83 plane. We're making some very small adjustments to the 83 plane relative to the 82 plane. In fact, we're moving the motor down 1/8 of an inch.
We're living 10 years in the past.
Yeah, that's for sure.
83.
83, yeah. Hey, if I was 83, my body'd be 10 years younger. To hell with your body. My body'd be younger. You don't need youth, I do. Anyway, gonna grind this out here. Okay, you got the sides all trued up?
Yeah, everything's looking.
Now Dave's gonna show the technique for getting 2 fuselage sides perfectly true. And these weren't, of course, because when you cut them out of a piece of wood, they spring. So what you do is butt one up against the other one and see where they touch. Okay, in this case they touched right about 2/3 of the way back from the high point of the wing. And so you can take that over to the edge of the table take that long sanding block that we had. Where's that long sanding block? People are getting sick of looking at this sanding block. Anyway, and a long sanding block, bring it right over to the edge of the table, hold it, and do the sanding with a long sanding block. Now these, he's already trued them up. Obviously we're going to use the top of the fuselage as our reference line for lining everything up. And we don't put the center lines on anything until we actually have the side true. First get the side true, then get the center line on for the wing lineup. And then with the crutch, the way this crutch is made, we have an 1/8 inch piece across the top. We can slide this in, and the top of the crutch gets referenced to the top of the fuse. And we should have relatively good alignment that way. Now what you do when you want to true the two fuse sides up is you butt them. And again, just knock down the part where they touch. Most of the time the wood will spring, it'll bow, and there'll be a high point right about in the middle. Then come back, put the two of them together, bless you, and then find a high spot and keep sanding away at the high spot until they're both equal. Again, one of the useful tools is if you have a sanding belt glued to the table, that's helpful. It's even better if you have the big wide belt, like the 4-inch belt like this, glued to the table. And then what you can do is after the fuse is all together, you can kind of just lay it down there and kiss off the high spots. Show what we're doing with the doublers. With a doubler ends, where it ends, we don't want a stress riser. I want it to go from 16ths down and taper. So obviously get some of this off with the belt sander, and then we can finish this off with a sanding block. And not to have a doubler end at a step, have it end at a very smooth transition. Okay, one of the things Dave has done is he's marked each side, which side of the wood and which side of the plywood is going to get the glue. Now I've seen many people, including myself, that have made 2 right fuselage sides, 2 left sides, or made some other kind of where you put the glue on the wrong side and then you have to wipe it all off. Well, it's easier if you do it this way, and he has some marked BX, AX, BX, AX, so you got the side the glue is going to go on, right for both sides. Okay, we ready with glue here, Gonzo?
We're ready.
Okay, you're going to do one body side at a time? Mm-hmm. Make sure you got a good mix in there. You don't need wax paper?
If you got some.
Yeah, go ahead. I think, yeah, I do have some. Put some wax paper down, make it easier.
Where's all that Teflon film?
It's under the table. And what the wax paper does, it just keeps the epoxy from getting all on the table. Okay, just move the epoxy down. Okay, go, and I'll do the other one. You doing B first?
I'm doing B.
Okay. Now what Dave did, and I suggest everybody do it, is pre-glue the sides. I mean pre-sand the sides so you don't have very rough edges here. We have relatively nice, soft, smooth joint. We won't get a mountain of epoxy in here. We're trying to do this obviously and keep the epoxy weight to some reasonable amount. Okay. Don't worry about it. Okay, wipe it down.
Okay, just join them up and then we'll wipe the rest off with alcohol.
I was lining the top and the front.
Okay, do the alignment. Go ahead. Take a little bit of alcohol, good old CVS alcohol. Now you get the top lined up. And you get a lot of that off in there.
It's in there. Gotta wait.
We'll put it down the flat end of the table. We'll put lacquer thinner cans on it. Just here, wipe the table. Take that epoxy and start gluing up the other side. Get the glue. I'll take care of lining this up. You get the epoxy mixed on that side. Okay. All right, I set the stopwatch. You still got 3 minutes working time.
We may not have enough.
All right, I'll mix some more if you need it. Let me get some of this on here.
Heat it up and make.
Yeah, you should have enough. Let me mix some more. What you do here, just heat this up and get a thin amount of it off. Get as much off as you can, so there's only a thin amount. There you go. Now just put it on here. Use it up there. That's it. There you go. And we'll go around the edge with CA so you have plenty. You know, the edges.
I just gotta get some on the back here.
Okay, flip it over. All right, flip it over, we'll wipe it with alcohol.
I got nothing down there.
Okay, get your alignment. I don't know how you've been aligning it. Off the top edge?
Yep, top edge in the front.
Okay, let me start wiping with alcohol. That press down. Okay, give it a good press before we put the weights underneath it. Get as much of the extras crap mixed off the side. That lined up pretty good. Now, when you're all done with the epoxy, what I always do is I go around the edge of the whole thing with thin CA so it seals it. There's no way oil or grease or anything can get in there. Pull that up. Let's do the other side. Now get rid of the wax paper. This side's clean. Watch sticking your hand in that garbage can, as I put razors in there already today. Okay, a little more alcohol here. Get 2 more lacquer thinner cans. I'm going to put this aside to dry for 5 minutes.
V, is that the new environmentally safe?
Yeah, you die after 10 years instead of 5. Okay, put 2 cans on this. Let this dry and we'll work on some other part here for a few minutes, 10-15 minutes. Okay. Yeah, get that off the table. Okay, after the epoxy's cured up and dried, what Dave's doing is re-truing up the surface. The top surface is the one we're concerned with, top. Now, the reason we're showing all this on video is we want to try a new way of doing a geodetic construction of the formers. Normally, the geodetic construction that are on some of the planes I have is very, very time consuming, and there's a problem. When you go to join all the formers in, you get little ripples in the fuselage side because they have to be so precise. I came up with an idea that years ago I had done. In fact, it's on the, if you go back and look at the sweeper plans from 1968, I had done this on the sweeper plans. And I want to try doing it again on this fuselage. We're going to obviously use Dave's plane here as a test bed for this. And what it is, we're going to lay out and plot out all the fuselage formers on a 30-degree angle. And then from the 30-degree angle, we're going to glue in some 1/8" square sea grain. Then we can make the fuselage formers not as precise as they would be, and we can just drop them in place and hot stuff them. We won't have to cut each one. Cutting each one won't be a half-hour time-consuming job. It should, and in the past when I've done this, it's been a tremendous time saving just not having to make the formers so precise. And because of the taper in the body, each former has to be almost within thousandths of an inch. It's really a time-consuming thing to do it. So now we're just going to go through, take this crutch. You can see some of the work he's got done already, and we're going to line up. This is basically our alignment thing. And get the crutch glued in. Pin the back of the fuselage together with a few drops of hot stuff and a spacer, and then get on with dropping these formers in. But first we have to plot out where all the formers would be. Okay, step one was we plotted out where the pipe tunnel will be, and we know that from last year's plane and from the plans. Okay, now we want to do geodetic formers, 30-degree angle. Everything geodetic, the best angle is 30 degrees. And we plotted out. We left room for the horn, let the first former be back about 1 inch, and just plot up and do it with a 30-degree triangle. We just have a normal drafting 30-degree triangle, and go back and plot out all the formers. The formers can end. This is the flap hinge line, the elevator hinge line, and the front of the stab. You only need formers from the front of the stab forward. Underneath the stab will be the tail wheel mount, and we should put the tail wheel mount in at a 30-degree angle. So the tail wheel mount actually becomes one of the effective formers here. But anyway, Dave's going to plot this out. Then you just do a mirror image. What you do is you take, funny name for it, with Dave's plane it's called a mirror image. What you do is lay the two top sides together and put a dot wherever there's a point. Go down here, put a dot wherever there's a point, and you make an effective mirror image of the part. So you have, on both sides of the fuselage, you have the formers laid out, where the formers will be, and then we're going to take some of that 1/8" square wood and just tack glue it in place with a couple little drops of CA. So we'll let him finish this, and then we'll come back to this when we're doing up the formers. Now what we did, we took all the 1/8" squares and just took a brand new razor and made them into triangles. And now what Dave is doing is making a little triangulated gusset for every former that we intend to use. But you have to put all the flat sides facing the front. They have to face the front so you can drop the formers all in from the top. We want to drop all the formers in from the top of the fuselage, not from the bottom. So you have to know that ahead of time before you do the triangulation. Now obviously you could do this with 1/8" squares, but by cutting them into triangles we've cut the weight in half. So it's a significant little weight saving by doing this. And these don't have to be all neat and sanded out or anything. Again, you could look at the old sweeper plans and see, back then I think I did it with 1/4 by 1/8, and that was you know, even overkill back then. That probably, I could have cut that in half and it would have been fine. But anyway, this is a nice way. And the reason for doing this and the saving is going to be when you actually cut the formers, they don't have to be anywhere near as precise. And at the same time, they can also be, you don't get the waves in the side of the body from when the formers are out by a couple of thousandths. You get little ripples in the body that you have to sand out. This way you get a very, very rigid body side. Very nice and stiff. And the reason you need this, with any pipe plane, you need to engineer in the stiffness because half of the body is a pipe tunnel. Half of the body is just going along for a ride like a wingtip. So by engineering this up, you're making like a bridge on one side. It makes up for the fact that you don't have the strength in the other half of the body. So we'll finish putting all these in, and then we're going to join the crutch together and then start dropping in the formers. That'll be the next step when Dave finishes this. Over there so I can show this on camera.
Hold it up so your world famous.
Hold it up. Mike Costello just came in with official Ballerina Plans. They're available only from
Mike, I just made these up at Staples Ostello.
Custom made.
Custom plan. Now, what did you do? You photo enlarged the magazine to get these?
200% enlargement of the
How do you-
magazine. And
Okay.
Then you make a 200% enlargement of the first 200% enlargement. So
this is a 400% of the magazine enlargement.
right. And the way you gauge it is you check the spinner diameter. And if,
Oh,
if you
okay.
put a ruler up against that 2-inch spinner, it comes out exact.
Okay,
There's
so.
other little notes on the plan that you can check the dimensions on.
Yeah. For anybody that's not interested or not interested, as the case may be, Ballerina Plans were never available. You never could just go buy Ballerina Plans. You had to concoct it or measure from the magazine or whatever. And so by doing this, now Mike has a master, which he's generously going to donate to Pro Stun Products in return for 3 slices of pizza
That
pie.
I bought.
I make him pay for the pie, and then I trade him for a set of plans. Not a bad deal. You can tell why I'm still working for peanuts, huh? Anyway, this is a nice thing, and we'll have it in inventory at some future time. I don't know how long it's going to take them to go run me those
Canopy
copies.
is available from Dave Midgley.
And Midgley's going to be molding up. Let's get a look at this really neat Ballerina Canopy, which you could put on a Magnum and say, hey, nobody know what the heck. Nobody knows anything around here anyway.
Well, this is an interesting design, a very sporty.
Oh, yeah. I built one of these, and you know, you can't use, I mean, plans have never been available. The things that Tom Dixon sells, I don't think anybody would consider plans, but anyway, they're not like this. They're like hand-drawn things. These are real nice. And when he used to make the Ballerina kit, you know, Licklider used to make a kit, he used to even include the fuel tank. Because John Davis, when we were at John Davis's house, he has 3 ballerinas there, made from kits.
I didn't know that.
Oh, man. The real Ballerina is still in a bar in Indianapolis. The guy has it in a glass case, the real one. So, hey, it's pizza time. And Midgley's trying to avoid doing his share of the work today, so.
Oh my God.
Pizza time. Let's eat, baby. The Ballerina lives at Pro Stunt. Okay, now with all the little triangles in place, each former doesn't, see, because each former on a geodetic body is tapered. And if you don't have the little triangles in it, each one has to be a perfect fit, and it takes a tremendous amount of time. This way, Dave can just lop off these formers a little bit undersized, and the little triangles in the corner take up the extra space, and you don't wind up with having to custom fit each one. Plus, you get a nice curve right down the body. You get a real nice curve going front to back. And this is the old thing. I just put the ruler right on top and run the razor across the ruler. You trim and run it right through your fingernail. You don't have to go for manicure then. Okay, and each one is just a little oversized, and you can, at some point in the future, just block sand each one in just a little bit. Now we got the former for the back of the tank box. Midgley's putting in the floor. Put a curve in the C grain, in the A grain, I mean. Curve in the 16th, the bottom of the pipe tunnel. Now one of the nice things I've done here, and you can do this obviously, is I've made some balsa plywood out of balsa with the grain going corner to corner to make our tank box out, and I'll make the tank box that way. The other thing too, since we know most 51s need a 1/4-inch tank shim, we glue the tank shim in and make it part of the body that does some work, not just go along for the ride. Okay, we finished up the tank box section here. Dave's working on making up the side shims for the tank. You obviously want to keep the tank right in the middle, so if we're going to put tank shims in, we may as well glue them in and let them be part of the nose construction where they can do some vibration absorption. ready to lay out the top block here. Obviously cleaned up the table, get off all the CA. Put the motor in and a spinner, line up the nose ring. Just tighten the bolts down, they'll come out that little piece of sheeting that we have on top. Put on an old junky 2-inch spinner here so we can carve the nose in. Obviously if we hit this spinner with you know, a piece of sandpaper, it won't be the end of the world. We got to put the nose ring on first, and then lay out the top block, and then take the big saw and cut up the top block. Get the profile shape up. Okay, you got the tank shims. He's got to go to tank shims in yet. Slick Midgley. Who said it's Slick Willie? Slick Midgley here. Okay, that's the tank shims. These are the side tank shims, not the top and bottom now. We're going to glue those in so they're part of the body, not just going along for the ride. Now what Dave's doing is we shimmed the half of the nose ring that we use for the top block, because you need that to carve in the top block, with just two pieces of 16th balsa to shim so you have clearance. After you have paint buildup and everything, you need some clearance there. And now we're going to lay out the side view of the top block, and then obviously get out the big saw, get out the big guy, and profile shape the top block. Yeah, it looks nose heavy, Dave. Slick Midgley. One day after the election, he's already nose heavy. I don't know.
Now we're tail heavy.
Alright, now Dave has this big giant block here, beautiful piece of wood, but obviously we want to get it. When you have a piece of wood this big, Dave, it's the best to get it go right down the middle of the wood. Don't try to save one edge of the wood. Get it like center line to center line. Then it's exactly the right length.
That'll be...
Okay. Now you want to take and tape it on in place, and let's lay out the side view of the body. Put a piece of masking tape right around like the high point of the wing. I want to lay out the side view of the body next.
Side view first, or do you want to lay out the top view first?
Side view first.
Okay.
Side view first. We have the big saw. It'll be no trouble to hack this up. Now, I just want to see if we're going to be able to get 2 top blocks out of this.
Like last year's saw?
No, I got the big saw. I got the good guy. No more of this working like we're in Czechoslovakia here. We're going for the full treatment here. We have a real saw. Anybody doesn't believe me? My wife bought me that for Christmas last year. And whenever I cut a top block, I think about her and I think how much I love her dearly. I hope she's watching this video, so maybe I'll get an extra slice of pizza tonight. All right, try to get it centered up, and then we're going to lay out the side view here. Hack the side view up, and then, you know, before obviously then get the view from the dimension from the bottom of the block up. But I think it's easier to cut it this way first. Dividends for it. All right, what we did with this, we laid out the top block so that we can actually get 2 top blocks out of it. The block is big enough that we'll have two top blocks out of 1. Well, we did get 2 equal top blocks out of that. Now we want to do the dimension from top to bottom. Obviously, press it up against the nose ring. Leave yourself a little extra clearance there. Don't do it right to the mark. And we'll do this with the little saw. We don't need the big one for this. Now when we do the carving operation and all that stuff, we always put the padded blanket on the table so you don't ding it all up and beat it all up. Now obviously first step here is going to be press the nose ring right in place and tack glue on the top block. Now it looks like we're pretty close to the end of this tape, so we'll probably pick up whatever we do tomorrow. Dave only has a half a day on the next tape.